So my name is Robert Adam and I work here at DCAL. At the moment I'm working on a particular project which is linked to sign segmentation. It's an ISRC funded project at City University. It's a research project including deaf people and their receptive, processing and productive skills in BSL. And I've covered 4 particular areas. Number 1 is sign spotting. I designed a clip which was shown to a group of deaf people. In the clip there was several signs. It was compiled of BSL actual signs that are really used and linked to the language, and also a selection of pseudo signs which are non-genuine fake signs. And this was designed in block design. The clip was interactive and they were to acknowledge the content at certain areas, explaining what signs were and what had been understood. I looked at the results of 6 particular people, 3 of which were native signers and 3 non-native signers. Comparing the results from the participants was really interesting, looking at where they noticed the errors lied. We identified 3 areas that were particularly important to the process. So, 1 was location, where the sign is produced, 2 is the movement, where the sign moves in the space, and 3 was the hand shape, the shape of the sign produced. But the question lies in why in these 3, and they were in that particular order of importance. I'll explain. In an experiment, a deaf person is facing straight ahead, whilst to the right a BSL user signs. Without looking and continuing to look forward, the deaf person can identify certain features of a sign, so the location can be identified fine, as well as the movement, which is possible to see. However, the hand shape is more problematic and more difficult to distinguish. It could be an index finger or a thumb, and that would be very difficult to tell while still looking forward. And that was the evidence that we concluded during this particular research. I have recently also been involved in presenting conferences. I did one over in San Diego at Coley Island University in New York, and then they have a regular conference there on the subject of sentence processing. I have also lectured at WFD, the World Federation of the Deaf, in Madrid. However, I'm now working on a similar project, where I am completing the same experiment again with a different theory. So it's the same process of the deaf people watching a series of clips, interacting with the clip and noticing when things are different. However, I have 3 individual areas of interest this time. Firstly, the ability to identify the correct BSL sign. It's easy to explain with the use of an example, so we will use the sign cake. As well as the correct BSL sign, we have a pseudo sign which consists of the same location and movement but an alternative hand shape. This was the first clip. The second clip is the same hand shape and movement but the incorrect location on the body. And a third clip with the same hand shape but another location. Each clip is signed by a different person. We then watch to see how quickly the deaf people are able to identify what the sign is with each of the different errors. What the research showed for me that was particularly interesting was that deaf non-native signers and deaf native signers both found different hand shapes easier to identify than a different movement. That's the conclusion I've come to through my collection of data. For my other 2 areas of research, I've designed a different experiment. I have titled it the Form Preparation Experiment. This is where deaf people practicing sign language watch BSL signs whilst having access to visual pictures. This is because of my theory linked to the phonology of signs. If you have an image as a visual aid during the learning of new signs, you have an increased chance of committing it to memory. So as a learner, you are primed to connect the 2 and remember the sign's meaning. That is the experiment I'm currently working on. It's a really interesting project, in particular how deaf people use segmentation and no sign boundaries to identify which are the most important. It is phonology, location, hand shape, and movement. One interesting discussion that has arisen throughout is that of orientation. I have not yet decided if it's completely linked to the hand shape or if it's a feature completely on its own. I've been going on this particular project for 3 years and it's due to finish next June.